the founder of an organization called the International Centre for Holistic Law, and we're based in the Findhorn Foundation community in Scotland. Our vision at the Centre for Holistic Law is a world in which human laws and legal practice were in alignment with the universal laws that govern all of life. So if human laws are that which regulate human behavior and human relationships, then it naturally flows from that it needs to take into account all of the relationships that humans have. And at the moment, our legal systems really only take into account relationships between rights holders, which are, broadly speaking, human beings and other entities that have been created by human beings, like corporations, ignoring the most fundamental relationship that human beings have, which is our relationship with the natural world.
So the Center for Holistic Law will try to encourage an alignment between the existing legal system and the laws of nature that you really can't offend, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we're also very much, part of our work at the International Centre for Holistic Law is looking at ways of resolving disputes that go beyond blame, that go beyond separation. So looking at the wider issues that affect all of us. Legal disputes are usually stemmed in societal problems, and they cannot be looked at in isolation. And so we're pioneering also innovative methods of dispute resolution that allow the voices of all the stakeholders to be heard and taken into consideration.
So this is a whole different legal process, isn't it? I mean, it's not the adversarial process. It's a process of finding solutions with many participants.
That's right. Our current legal system is based on a paradigm of retribution. And as you know, when we look at relationships, if I'm having a dispute with my friend and I'm seeking retribution, it's not really going to advance things in a positive way. So on a similar vein, we have certain practices that take us towards war, and we have certain practices that take us towards peace. Certain practices that unite us and certain practices that separate us. And so we're seeking to use law as a tool to unite us and to bring restoration, reparation and healing rather than retribution.
Let me take you back to the beginning of all of this, because one of the things I find fascinating about your story is that it begins in, of all places, the financial heart of London, the city of London, the very belly of the beast. And how did you get from there to Findhorn and holistic law?
Right, yes. It was an interesting journey. And yes, I did start out, you know, in the so-called belly of the beast, or, you know, as what some people may see as part of the problem. I was a structured finance lawyer. I worked in the City of London. I used to represent investment banks, governments, large multinationals on very big transactions that involved several jurisdictions, etc. A lot of complex work. And I found that this was, on the outside it was going very well, but in my inner world something was not quite sitting right. And one day I had a profound spiritual awakening, and literally overnight my worldview changed. And so when I went back into the office, nothing there resonated with me anymore. Everything was back to front, it was inside out, nothing really made sense. I found that the work that I was doing was not really in alignment with what I really valued in this world. And so I came out of there and I started to pursue a deeper inquiry. I started to pursue a path of healing and spiritual practice, and I trained with some of the most profound spiritual teachers of our time.
Now, what was this? What was the spiritual experience that turned this over? Because this is a fascinating situation where one day you're more or less aligned with what you're doing, and then suddenly it's gone completely out of harmony. Right?
Yes. Well, okay. I was raised in a fairly spiritual environment. I'd grown up practicing yoga and meditation, and had been brought up in the spiritual traditions of my ancestors. And there came a time when I wanted to turn away from that and really experience what the mainstream of life was saying was the route to happiness. And this led to me pursuing the career path that I did, and I pursued it wholeheartedly. And so one day when my father wanted to go and visit Mother Mira, who's an enlightened being who's residing in Germany, invited me and my husband to come with him, I was really not very interested. At that point I'd convinced myself that there is nothing spiritual in this world, it's just a scientific material world, and you know, and that's pretty much what life is all about, and she's probably a fake, and it's nothing of interest to me. However, the reason that my father was going was because my sister was actually very ill at the time, and he wanted to take her for healing. And my sister was refusing to go. So my father pleaded with me, and he said, well, if everybody comes, at least I can say to your sister that it's a family holiday, and you know, you don't even need to come and see Mother Mira. You could just hang out. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not interested in going to see Mother Mira, but I'm interested in helping my sister. So if it would be of help to her, then I'll come along. And of course, once I got there, I couldn't resist going to see Mother Mira.
Yeah,
so,
who is this person?
So I went, and when I walked into the hall, Mother Mira has two assistants, and they balance the energies in the room by adjusting the seating between people. So, you know, they would sometimes move people, ask people to sit in certain positions. So I walked into the room, and as soon as I walked into the room, the assistant motioned to me and my husband and asked us to sit on a seat right in front of Mother. And my initial thought at the time was, wow, they're very hospitable to skeptical people. And then when my father and my mother and my sister walked in, they motioned for them to sit on the side. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, there might be something more to this, because she's ill. So anyway, Mother Mira came into the room, and I went into a deep meditation. All of my, you know, my childhood upbringing and my deep reverence for the spiritual came back to me as soon as I was in the presence of this incredible being. And I received Mother Mira's blessing, which she does in a very particular way. She works with the central channel, she says, where certain karmic codes are encoded, and they appear in the form of knots. And she looks directly for about 6 seconds into the eyes of each person. And when she does that, she's unknotting these knots within the central channel. So after the session that night, I had the most incredible sleep. And during that sleep, I found that I was having these dreams where I was held by these incredibly beautiful swirling colors, which I later found a book of paintings by Mother Mira where she was describing other dimensions of reality. And in these paintings, she had these incredibly beautiful swirling colors, a bit like I'd seen in my dream. So anyway, I came out of there and I came back to the office, and it was like the show was over. What am I doing here? I thought.
And how did your colleagues react? Because you then basically, your body was there, but you had spiritually left the building, right?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first changes that I made was that I turned my desk around because I had a beautiful view of the sky and I wanted to be a little bit more connected to nature and what was going on in the world. And in my job, we used to work incredible hours. Working all through the night through to the next day was quite common. You know, leaving the office at 3 a.m. It was commonplace. So we never really got to go outside. So I turned my desk around to look at the sky and I started playing subliminal, relaxing music in my room. And people used to come into the office and all of a sudden they would just forget what it was that they'd come to talk about. And they would say, wow, I feel really nice. And then they'd start talking about, you know, something personal. And after a short time, my room became known as the love room. So, yeah. And there was, you know, coming to how I managed to, you know, to come away from that period of work, the pain of being in that environment got more and more intense for me. And one day when I was there late at night working on a transaction, I ended up having a heart-to-heart with my boss, you know, saying, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this to ourselves? What's the end result of what we do? Some corporation or some bank just ends up making a little bit more money. And what are they doing with the money? Are they solving the problems of poverty in the world? No, they're not. They're investing it in things that sometimes can be causing damage. And I don't really know why I'm doing this. And so my boss said, well, why don't you leave? And I said, well, I can't leave because I'm in this situation where we're building a house and, you know, I just don't know what to do. And he said, well, something in him really heard me. And he said, well, how about we structure it as a redundancy? You know, maybe you could I could give you, say, a year and a half's pay, and that would give you an opportunity to finish building your house, and by then you'd discover what it is that you really want to do. Personally, I think once you've gone out there and seen what it's like out there, you'll know how good it is here and you'll be back here. But, you know, how about it? And I thought, wow, this is fabulous. So I took it, and I haven't turned back.
Have you seen him since?
No, I haven't.
I'm just curious to know what he would think about it.
Yeah, it would be very interesting. Actually, I would like to see him one of these days.
He sounds like somebody that's got some spark.
I got on fabulously with him. He was a great guy. And yeah, and so from there, you know, it gave me the opportunity to really deepen my spiritual practice, and I started traveling with my spiritual teacher and really going intensely into on the spiritual path. And it was during that time that at the back of my mind, even though, you know, the world of healing and the world of spirituality was absorbing me so completely and so bringing me so much fulfillment, I really wondered why it was that I'd been trained to the nth degree in something that that was now utterly irrelevant to me. I could see that the way law was structured, it was entrenching the victim-perpetrator paradigm in our society, and I really wondered how we could bring about peace through methods that are primarily based on war. So I asked my spiritual teacher whether I ought to continue in some way looking at being able to use the law in order to serve humanity, or whether to just abandon that idea completely and focus on something else. And what she said to me was very simple. She said, stay in law for now, and when the opportunity comes to serve, just take it. So about a week later, I found myself in the Virgin Islands, and I was approached by somebody on the island saying that the government had recently given approval for a golf course and a 5-star hotel in an area of international ecological importance. In fact, a protected area with a Ramsar code and internationally recognized as a protected area. Even though there had been debates for years and years and lots of environmental studies, finally the chief minister had just unilaterally given his consent. So the chief conservation officer was tearing his hair out because he wanted to bring a case, but no lawyers on the island would help him. It was the kind of island, it was a small island, everybody knew each other, and so there are a lot of complex interrelationships between the people. Nobody would dare go against the government, and in this scenario you'd have to go against the chief minister personally, and the chief minister was the guy who personally would have to sign all the work permits and all the business permits of the lawyers. So yeah, so understandably very few lawyers were interested in taking it up. So I thought to myself, okay, when the opportunity comes to serve, just take it. And so I went to go and see him, and we had a discussion. We had 3 weeks to file a case. I had no knowledge of environmental law. I thought, okay, let's do it. So the first port of call for me was to start working on the energy with the spiritual practices and the healing practices that I had learned. And as soon as I started to do that, I found that miracles started to happen. Within the time, 3 weeks, which is a very short time space, to amass all of the evidence that would be necessary to bring a challenge, everything just came, and we were in a position to file the case. At this point, it wasn't even clear whether citizens would even have standing, because no environmental cases had ever been brought in this particular jurisdiction. And so we organized as an NGO. There was one Caribbean case where the citizens had gotten standing, and that was only because it was brought by an organization with an international reputation and, you know, the scientific knowledge and all of that. It was Greenpeace that brought this case. So we thought, okay, we'll form the Virgin Islands Environmental Council, and we got hold of whatever scientific experts that we could and prominent people that we could find in the community to come on board with this NGO. It was very difficult to get somebody prominent from the community to sign their name behind the case, and it had to be somebody personally bringing the case. But eventually a prominent man in the community stepped forward, and we filed. So what happened as a result of this? At that time, I was still volunteering and touring and studying with my spiritual teacher. And so as soon as we filed the case, I was off the island and I was on tour in Europe. So I discovered a new way of doing law. We were in a new city every 2 to 3 days, and I was working from morning till night in the organization of my spiritual teacher running these programs. And so I really didn't know where I was going to find the time or the space. I had no idea whether I'd have internet connection, how I'd be able to get hold of people, when the hearings were going to be, and I thought this would be very interesting. But what I found was that all I had to do was stand as a channel for grace. And I found that the case was doing itself. Miraculously, whenever anything needed to be responded to, or any business needed to be transacted, I'd find that I would have internet connection. All of the people that I needed to connect with would be online at that time. We'd transact our business in incredibly efficient time, and then I'd be back with my spiritual teacher. And this was a completely new experience to me, because working in a law firm, I was used to the, you know, you would push and push and push and push and, you know, be like working on it, working on it, working on it, even though in reality, things only move in a very prescribed way. So when I started to notice that there was an orchestration and a timing that was beyond my control. And all I had to do was to be incredibly present to what was actually unfolding, and to be a conduit for the energy. to facilitate the process. So the outcome of all of this, I mean, launching the case was very useful. Even though, yes, it was engaging in the adversarial process, it was useful because it stopped work from starting. It stopped the diggers from going in. And the first fortunate thing that happened in the chain was that the developers' funding got pulled as a result of the case. So that bought us time. However, we thought it was going to be a quick process, which was part of the reason that I was prompted to take it on. It was going to be a judicial review, and in the legislation it said you get a result in 3 months. It took us 3 years because the developers joined the action, and they kept stalling it. So they kept applying for these, extensions, and it just kept getting pushed back and further back. By this time, we had a legal team, and the people on the island started to feel more empowered. Initially, it was the kind of place where people felt very disempowered because the government ran the shots, and they really didn't have a voice. But somehow, launching this case really kind of caught the imagination of the people. And so we worked on many different levels. Because people were highly interrelated and they knew each other, we started working with dialogues, with building relationships, with rallying around the shared values. So this is where we started working in a non-adversarial way, showing that actually, by preserving what we have in terms of our biodiversity and preserving nature, we're actually building a much richer future for our countries and for future generations. And the government started to change their view on things, so much so that by the time our court case came to be heard, in the government's national tourist brochure, they were actually bragging that they're such an environmentally friendly nation that we even have, a local group that are challenging the government in court on environmental grounds. So anyway, we won at first instance. Of course, because we were restricted to the planning and administrative courts, we had to find fault with the planning process. So we went for every single angle that we could get. What the judge found was that development couldn't happen, so we won purely on the basis that it was a protected area and it was prohibited by law for any development to happen there. So that was great. However, the developers did appeal, and the appeal was carried out in St. Lucia. And on appeal, we weren't so fortunate because the St. Lucian judge decided to go with the developers, who were putting forward an argument that there was a technical drafting error in the way the law had been created. Instead of calling it a fisheries protected area, they referred to it as a marine protected area. And so in actual fact, the judge says, well, the area is not protected, even though there have been all these environmental studies, and there was actually no dispute in the planning process about the protected status of this area. The judge still ruled that actually it's not protected, and so the development can go ahead. However, and this is the beauty of this case, the government had such a change of heart in the way they were perceiving the issue that they came forward and they said, okay, well, we'll just change the law. The planning permission had lapsed. We'll change the law and we'll word it as the judge wants it. And on top of that, we'll declare the area a national park. So, I mean, anybody who's had any experience of trying to bring environmental cases in the public interest would know that this is an absolutely phenomenal result. Usually, if the government had still retained the same posture and we'd say we'd have won at court. At the very best, all we would have won is that the decision would go back to the planners, the developers would make one or two changes and to get around what the judge said, and then usually the development goes ahead in some shape or form. So this was an absolutely astounding result. So after that, I came to the conclusion that, okay, I've got my learnings in law. I can see that this adversarial process, you know, it doesn't work and it's not for me. And that's great. If all changes happen fundamentally at the energy level, and I'll just continue focusing on that.
You know, the most striking thing to me about that story is that because your vision is at a level above the adversarial nature, like the normal lawyer would take this on and would never question that framework. They'd just work within it in an adversarial way, but you're coming at it in a sort of a problem-solving way, in a much more open kind of way. And then it sounds as though you, I don't know how much by design and how much by just evolution it was, but it sounds as though you basically had a whole educational process that went on that finally affected the government. And it's really it's a fascinating story, because in a sense what I'm hearing is, so we bought a little time and that gave people a chance to think, and then we got another little bit of time and that gave other people a chance to think, and as they thought more about it, the people in the government started to think about it, and it evolves in a very non-adversarial way, even though it's an adversarial process. But it uses the law as a kind of a learning process for the entire community.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And this is the beauty of taking a holistic approach.
Yeah. The other thing that strikes me is in that story is the remarkable experience with Mother in Germany, because you go into that. I mean, at one level, if you had been, you know, very much in a spiritual path in the first place, it would be less. Well, you might never have been in the law firm, I guess, but you go in there with no expectation of change. You've got the sort of the foundational understanding of the situation, but you go in there basically to convenience your father, and and to do something for your sister, and the idea that anything is going to change for Mumta is not on the agenda at all. And then you have this profound experience, and you come out into a different world. But the striking thing for me is, if you were ready for that, you didn't know it, right?
Absolutely. In fact, the person who was leading the tour, taking people to see Mother Mira, she sat us down and she said, people sometimes they undergo profound change. Sometimes their lives fall apart. If their relationships are not aligned, sometimes their relationships fall apart. If their work is not aligned, they find their work falls apart. And I thought, there's absolutely no way on earth that anything is going to fall apart in my life.
And then it does.
Yeah, and then the whole thing fell apart.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Fascinating.
So let me come back to Europe, because I can see the sort of evolution of how you get to the point where you're thinking very differently, but you're also feeling very empowered, right? I mean, because essentially you're starting a movement here to change the legal system of 27 countries. Right?
Well, absolutely, and again, there's a little bit of a story of how I came into that. It wasn't that one day I woke up and I thought, what, we've got this initiative and I'm going to do something about it. It was a little bit of an evolutionary process. After the Virgin Islands case, I thought, right, well, that's it. I don't need to do anything further with law. I'm clear. I'm just going to continue on my path of healing. And I became a mum, and our family, me and my husband and my daughter, we went up to go and live in the Findhorn community in Scotland. And it was around that time when I had a minor physical issue, and I went to a kinesiology session. Kinesiology is a way of testing the muscles to see whether something is true or not true, and it's a way of bypassing the mind and going into the body intelligence. And very usually they would test the muscles to see if you're allergic to certain foods and that sort of thing, but they could test a whole variety of issues. So I went for a kinesiology session about this minor physical issue. And what came out of the session was that I need to put together a project that brings law and healing together, that shifts the whole paradigm of the legal profession from adversarial to a paradigm of healing, restoration, reparation, and that takes into account the rights of all beings. And in order to know more fully what I should do, that I should do a series of meditations, an extra 2 hours of meditation, and I was already doing about 3 hours of meditation a day anyway. So an extra 2 hours of meditation, sending healing to the legal profession every day for a month, during which time I'd get more clarity. And I did that. At first, very disbelievingly. And you know, and very much dismayed, thinking, oh, I thought maybe I could avoid certain foods, and that would be all I'd need to do. Yeah, so I was sort of a little bit skeptical when I went into these meditations that anything would come, but amazingly, a lot of information, a lot of clarity came through, and so I would sit there each day with a notepad and jot down all the insights that came to me, and that culminated in the creation of the International Center for Holistic Law.